Would anyone be shocked to know that the percentage of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students who complete their degree that they start is just 47% national? Just 47%. And as opposed to 75% for non-Indigenous students. Only 25 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander PhDs graduated last year. Out of all universities, out of 39 universities in the country. We need a 365% increase on today's data, current enrolments, to actually reach parity, which we think is roughly about 3%. Indigenous owned and run businesses are actually 100 times more likely to employ an Aboriginal person than a non-Indigenous business. The difficult about Indigenous science is that everything is connected to everything else. Everything is connected. If we can have more of our young people going into those science degrees and technology degrees and actually informing Western science and saying, you guys haven't got this right, this is nowhere near right, it's going to make it better for all of us. If a people can live for 40, 50, 60,000 years in the country, and 200 years later we're worried about we're all going to die out, there's something odd about that.
I'm going to talk as a Canadian, and my experiences and my thoughts are all based in Canada, but having been to Australia many times, I think that much of my thinking is relevant, so I hope you don't mind my perspective coming over here. But in 1962, a woman named Rachel Carson published a book called Silent Spring. And it was all about the unexpected effects of pesticides. Science does not see that everything in nature is connected to everything else. So you spray chemicals on a field to kill insects, and you end up affecting fish and birds and human beings. And I realized then how restrictive science is. This is why I was talking a little earlier, and I feel when you say Indigenous science, that diminishes the body of knowledge that is thousands of years old. Fundamentally different way of seeing the world. And the challenge is not to try to give yourselves a higher level by putting in a fancy word, but get people to recognize the difference in Indigenous knowledge, and that it is far more profound and will never be duplicated by science. Scientists don't know enough. We have a very powerful way of analyzing the world around by focusing on a part of nature. But we still are unbelievably ignorant about how the world works. So by the time you get to the fatty tissue in the shell glands of birds or in the breasts of women, you've concentrated these pesticides hundreds of thousands of times. How could we have managed DDT when we only discovered the phenomenon of biomagnification when eagles began to disappear? And we find that over and over again. And now we're using genetically modified organisms. We're talking about putting genetically modified salmon into the ocean and plants growing out in open fields. We're talking about nanotechnology and artificial intelligence. Haven't we learned anything from the history of science to realize there will be phenomenal impacts of these powerful techniques, but we have no idea what the long-term consequences will be? That the fish and the birds and the water and the trees are all a part of what makes the Haida who they are. That their culture, their very meaning for why they are on this planet, their history, is tied up in their connection to the land. Take away parts of that landscape, and you lose a part of what it is that makes the Haida who they are. There's an incredible relationship between the people and the land, and that relationship is built on gratitude. Gratitude brings with it a reciprocal relationship of obligation, of responsibility. When you're grateful for receiving a gift, you have an obligation as well. There is a reciprocity in that relationship. And that's a relationship of reciprocity to our mother and to future generations. And though that kind of responsibility, of course, is completely, or not completely, but tends to be obliterated in the dominant society. irony is, after all that has been done to our First Nations in Canada, they have something so precious that we in the dominant society need. And I hope that this is happening in Australia as well, because these cultures will, as I said, will never be duplicated by science. They're fundamentally different ways of seeing our relationship with the earth, and they have been tested over time for our survival. Thank you.
Yeah.